class, I'll be teaching the Neocortex chapter, one of the important question, that is the concept of the cerebral asymmetry. This question will be usually asked for 5 marks, as we know that in our brain we have two cerebral hemispheres. One is on the left side, one is on the right side. So there is left hemisphere as well as right hemisphere. Both look the same. Structurally they look same, but functionally they are different. Both look the same but performs the different function. They are mainly concerned with the language as well as speech. They are mainly concerned with the language and speech. So there is a dominant hemisphere. In the two hemisphere, one is dominant hemisphere and another one is the non-dominant hemisphere. So the dominant hemisphere is also called as the categorized hemisphere. It is categorized. And the non-dominant hemisphere is also called as non-categorized hemisphere. So the dominant hemisphere is concerned with the language and speech, whereas the non-dominant hemisphere is not concerned with the language. So the dominant hemisphere is concerned with the language and non-dominant hemisphere is not concerned with the language. So we'll speak briefly about the dominant hemisphere as well as the non-dominant hemisphere. So first we'll look after the categorized hemisphere. The categorized hemisphere is also called as the dominant hemisphere or non-representational hemisphere. The categorized hemisphere is also called as dominant hemisphere or non-representational hemisphere. It is mainly concerned with the language and speech. So which is the categorized hemisphere? It is the left hemisphere. Remember, the left hemisphere is always the categorized hemisphere, whereas the right hemisphere is always the non-categorized hemisphere. So the left hemisphere of the brain mainly helps in verbal as well as sequential processing. It helps in mathematical learning and it is well developed compared to the right hemisphere. So these are some of the points of the categorized hemisphere. Now we look after the non-categorized hemisphere. So the next one is the non-categorized hemisphere. We look after it. It is also called as the non-dominant hemisphere or the representational hemisphere. It is called as non-dominant hemisphere or the representational hemisphere. It is mainly concerned with the visuospatial relationship. It is mainly concerned with the visuospatial relationship. What is visuospatial relationship? Mainly includes like drawing the faces, drawing the pics, identifying the pictures, recognizing the object, recognizing anyone's face, musical themes. So all these things, if you are being able to recognize or you are able to draw, then it is called as visuospatial relation. By visualizing, you are being able to understand the things. It is also called as the representational hemisphere. Which is the one? It is the right hemisphere. So the non-categorized hemisphere is the right hemisphere. It is specialized for non-verbal, non-mathematical, non-sequential processing, whereas the left hemisphere is concerned with the verbal, mathematical, sequential processing. The right hemisphere is concerned with the non-verbal, non-mathematical, non-sequential processing. It mainly helps in the musical perception to identify the songs, chorus, all those. Right hemisphere is mainly involved in this. So next we'll study about the cerebral lateralization. So what do you mean by cerebral lateralization? So here the person is able to identify the language, the visuospatial function, all the visuospatial function. It helps in controlling the movement of your body, the posture, all those things, equilibrium, cognitive function, awareness function, some higher order functions. And the left hemisphere is highly evolved and highly cognitive compared to the right hemisphere. You have to remember this. So the left hemisphere is highly evolved and highly cognitive compared to the right hemisphere. So what is the role of hemisphere basically? The hemisphere serves in descriptive function called as cerebral lateralization. So they both have different varieties of function. Left hemisphere plays a very important role in speech, whereas right hemisphere plays a very important role in visuospatial relationship. So both have different functions. Structurally they might be same, but the function of both the hemispheres is different. So we'll study some more important points. In human beings, there are 96% of the people are right-handed. They do their major works in their right hand. So because why is this happening? Because in their body, dopamine concentration is very high. And the left hemisphere is dominant. You know that opposite sides, contralateral, work in this manner. So right-handed, left hemisphere is sharp. In the left-handed, right hemisphere is sharp or the dominant thing. So the left, in the 96% of the people, right-handed is dominant and they are dominant, and dopamine concentration is very high. Left hemisphere is dominant. and they are very capable in vocalization. 4% of the people are left-handed because dopamine concentration is very less compared to the right-handed people, and their right hemisphere is dominant, which helps in recognizing the faces. They are easily able to identify the faces, recognizing faces. If there is even a small lesion in these areas, it can cause a huge effect. As you know, if there is even a small minute damage any parts of the brain, spinal cord or hemispheres, whatever it might be, there it will give a huge effect. So it might cause the lesion in the visuospatial defects, or even you will be unable to recognize the face, or you cannot draw the drawings properly. It might be astereognosis. Astereognosis is basically you are not being able to identify the known objects with your closed eyes. You don't know what is that object with your closed eyes. And agnosia is you are unable to identify the sensation. You are not being able to sense the feelings or sense the touch, pain, temperature. So there might be lesion in the parietal lobe. I'll give you some example. These kind of things can be observed in the hemisphere defect. They do not dress half of their body, only half side they'll dress, or shave only half of the faces, eat only half in the plate, read half in each page. They might go to under mental depression, sadness. So it is categorized, that is left hemisphere you can see the mental depression. In the right hemisphere you can see the euphoria. It means you're intensely fully in with the intense, you're happy, you're sad, or full of excitement. It'll be intense feeling. So in the left hemisphere you can see the mental depression mainly if there is lesion, and in the right hemisphere you can see euphoria. So this was the important topics of this chapter. I hope you understood this video. So please do like, share and subscribe. Thank you.